Hello, and welcome to this week's super cocaine-fueled episode of the Imaginary Movie Podcast, which is the weekend one. This is Pilot Light, where we watch the first episode of a TV program and then we rag on it. My name's David Bulk, and I'm here with my saber-toothed dinosaur, Mighty Morphin whatever. Let's fight some aliens, yeah?
Excellent. My name's Sam, and unlike the Power Rangers, this podcast is only 40% new footage.
If we can dream of 40% new footage.
And I'm Joe. And transport to us 5 overbearing and over-emotional humans.
Yes.
So, teenagers, Joe, or what? Like, I don't know. Let's maybe.
Hey, that wasn't the quote. It was humans.
Wasn't the
Well,
quote.
there's three of them right here, I think, definitely.
By the way,
so-
I would just before we start, can I just say I'd like to think that somewhere someone like watched last week and was expecting us to be doing Modern Family, just watched those intros and is now confused as fuck.
Yeah, one of my favorite podcast editions of just like fucking just lying at the end of the episode about what we're doing next week.
We really must stop. We've said so many times the wrong thing.
Fuck it, who cares?
No, I just like that somebody out there is dead confused right now. It's like, did I watch the wrong episode of Modern Family? How did I not get the first episode?
Yeah.
Is there a Power Rangers crossover? I'm confused.
Ooh,
So this
there we
week
go.
we watched the 1993 episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the episode that started it all, called Space Dumpster or
Something like that. Yeah,
Dumpster.
dumpster babies.
Something in the
not
dumpster.
that.
Day
This
of the
TV
Day of the
show.
Dumpster.
Day
It's called
Day of the
Day
Dumpster. Once
Yeah.
again, like we have really like absolutely 100% prepared for this podcast. So this was a last minute amendment to the schedule because Sam suggested we watch it, and Joe and I are basically so spineless that we said, "Ooh."
You had no good argument against that at all, and nor could you, because this is like everything we want. This is everything we want. This is nostalgia, yes. 90s, yes. Toys, yes. Mass consumerism, and
Dinosaurs!
Everything.
Dinosaurs!
everything we could ever want from a TV show, and a little bit less, to be honest.
Yeah.
So,
Sam, I'm going to delay your plot summary. I want to talk about, just briefly, because Joe and I certainly watched the Toys That Made Us episode of on Power Rangers. So we're like, you know, as knowledgeable as we will ever be about Super Sentai and the consumerism wave that spawned this TV show of like, can I just say off the top, like the brilliance of like, hey guys, if we just reuse footage from this Japanese TV show, no, I don't care if the cast are 4 foot shorter and different genders to our cast. Like, if we just use that footage for all the fight scenes, all the expensive fight scenes, all the special effects scenes, we just reuse that. It's free. Like, we don't have to pay for it. And someone's like, genius.
It's the renaming that gets me as well. Like some of the names, Putty Patrollers.
We'll get into this, I think. So obviously, Power Rangers is kind of like spawned from a Japanese series called Super Sentai, which is kind of like a semi-long running Japanese tradition of TV shows where you have this kind of like, you know, this called Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which is kind of like a morphing is kind of like the translation of what Super Sentai would do. They would kind of like morph into the superheroes. It's not like
Morphosis. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not like Batman. He's not putting on a mask, you know, and having a load of gadgets. Like it's more like Shazam. He says a word and he becomes somebody else, and then they're a superhero that way.
And the actual the one that you get from Mighty Morphin Power Ranger is actually a show called Zhu Ranger in Japan. That's the name of the show that they use for this series. Anyway.
Wow.
So
what I enjoyed was the footage from this into the American version. It's like the 16th season or something. Like it's so. It's not even like they had a good idea and then after a couple of seasons thought, we could translate this into.
They actually tried. It was actually tried to be brought over earlier than this. So the first season was in 1994. Was it?
93.
93. It wasn't far off. But Stan Lee actually tried to take it to Marvel in the early 80s. But none of the execs would pick it up. They all went, no, this is stupid. Go away, Stan. Shut up.
But it is stupid. We should say that off the top. This is a stupid fucking show.
My God.
And obviously we grew up with it, but it's silly. If you look at like Western kids stuff, it's cartoons. It's like fairly, what's the word? Grounded. Like in Japan, you can have a silly show with like mostly bad fight scenes and like ridiculous puppet monsters, and it'll all be live action. And the Japanese audience, they fucking love that because they've got this rich history of it. In the West, we don't have that. We don't have like the silly factor, I think, is what I would call it. Like,
and that's
goofy.
what they were saying. That's what they were saying in like the toys that made us, because the first thing they tried to do was sell when they made. So Bandai were the Japanese firm who made the toys in Japan for Power Rangers, and they're these really big, like morphing dinosaur robot type things. And when they first made Bandai America and tried to sell them in America, they absolutely bombed, because at that time, like the American version of a robot was like the Jetsons, effectively. So we've a previous episode, by the way, but like the robot in the Jetsons use this like clumsy kind of human quality, kind of human sized sort of tin, basically. And then for them suddenly
sentient being that you own and cleans your house.
Yeah. Whereas the Japanese
version of
the Japanese version's this huge, like 30-foot tall monster that can like shoot lasers out of its arm and costs $70. And I'm not joking. And then
we should say
cost $70.
The Japanese toys are really look like really cool, really well made, like really well engineered, like decent toys. And obviously the European version of that especially is just trash. Like it will fall apart in a week's time.
But who in the 80s is affording a $70 or $80 toy? Realistically,
well, we did. It
Japanese businessmen. That's who.
It reminded me of our. Do you remember our Jingle All the Way episode, Sam?
Yeah,
like that's a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger where it's all about like mass consumerism and like
get the doll.
Toy. Exactly, like that is all. That is a film you should go and watch if you maybe were born after the 90s, or like you just aren't aware. Like people were fucking mad in the 90s for kids' toys. Like,
yeah. Well, in case you were born after the 90s, congratulations to you. And you don't know what Power Rangers is, you sado.
I think they know what Power Rangers is, Sam.
You're still going. Power Rangers
maybe,
is still going. So,
but in this show, this is a start. This is the beginning of it. And in this show, we get to see a team of teenagers with attitude who are recruited to save Angel Grove from the evil witch Rita Repulsa.
I think largely these are quite pleasant, well-rounded, like sober-looking teenagers.
I know.
To be honest.
I mean, I'd buy lemonade off these kids. These seem like they wouldn't spike.
Rita Repulsa, I love
Rita Repulsa. I know. I mean, it's not. I don't think we really need to go super into the lore and the in-depth.
We don't at all. But the basic premise is like. Rita
bad guys,
Repulsa
kids fight bad guys.
The bad guy.
Robots.
She has this cabal of like Flash Gordon-esque like sidekicks who are all basically like men in really cheap plastic suits. And then you have on the good side, you've got Zordon, who is a head in a jar. Obviously, he's omnipotent. He knows everything. Don't even worry about it. He's a head on a jar. He's there so that when this woman's invariably released, he can be like, me and my robot, we've got this. We should delineate here, by the way, that basically the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, like I said, it's from Super Sentai, and it's kind of like, so this first episode especially is split into two parts. So we've got about half of it is footage that they filmed with the American kids, and about half of it is just reused and dubbed footage from Super Sentai. Like, well, so all the stuff with the villains, Rita is a character from Super Sentai. Like, so the only bits that were filmed for this are like the scenes with the kids and the scenes with Zordon. Like, again, the kids are there.
You know the enemies though. You know what they reminded me of? It felt as though I was watching The Labyrinth again. Just like, from David Bowie. It looked fresh out of The Labyrinth.
Ooh. There's a weird movie we should watch, but I don't really want to. Like, don't look at it.
It's crazy.
Don't look straight at it.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this soup of TV production, because this is like I think this is probably the most distinctive thing about Power Rangers is that it's blending these two completely different styles of television into one, and the jagged edges that are left, I think, are just extraordinary. The biggest example is probably the fight scenes, which we'll come to the kids in a minute. The fight scenes are so disruptive. They're so like they move in almost on a shot for shot basis from like we're in the California plains and now we're in a rocky rocky mountain top. And now
there's a lot of Rocky Mountain.
Now we're in a city. How did we get here? And then we're back to the mountaintop, and then we're back in the plains.
They make like a comment about it as well, when they like change to a city, and they're like, "Oh, we're in a new environment, look," or something like that. It's like,
and
what?
Basically, the production says, "Don't worry about it. Kids do not care about continuity of things like we were in the ocean 5 minutes ago."
We didn't at all. No one gave a shit, and that's what's so amazing about this. Because I actually remember as a kid not being able to watch this because it was too violent and kind of like reasonable, reasonable enough. There's quite a lot of fighting. I do let Callum watch it, but I kind of stagger him a little bit. I'm like, you can watch a couple episodes because after that it just feels like. But mostly because...
Well, he hasn't yet got a little brother to beat the shit out of, Sam. So
that is true.
For that.
But, and I asked my mum about this because we were talking to her about what Callum was watching. And she was like, you know what, Sam, mostly I just couldn't stand it. I just couldn't stand to watch it because it was so shit. And I'm totally with her right now because I'm like, this TV show in extended periods, I feel like I'm going to have some kind of seizure. And not just the flashing lights, just because of the sheer gravity of the ill production. Like, it just looks utter crap. Which,
well, the biggest thing for that is, like I said, we've got footage from an older Japanese TV show, and we've got footage that they shot intentionally. Now, somehow Super Sentai footage looks 10 million times worse than the native footage. And I'm like, I just don't understand how this long-running Japanese TV show looks even worse than this footage that we know, and we'll get into this in a minute. They spent about $4 on the American footage.
Shot on degraded film. But
exactly. It looks like they took this film and they stored it at the bottom of a canal for 5 years, and then they brought it back and like just put it in this episode. It's really shocking.
Yeah.
But I think from having like looked around at Super Sentai stuff, it's like that's the aesthetic that they kind of like. That's what Japanese TV looked like in the 90s. More, less so than. So you've got this. I said earlier, like this is basically what if Saved by the Bell was superheroes. Like it
Funnily
really
enough,
is that
one of the actresses in this, the one that's the Pink Power Ranger, actually appeared in Saved by the Bell, the new class. So there you go. There's a link for you.
Oh, there we go. Nice little connection. The beginning of this episode, I think, is like it tracks as a 90s TV show. Number one, everyone is wearing like just a single color. They've got these single color T-shirts on. It's just like
Well, Sam.
I'm not. Well, hold on. I'm not even talking about the main cast. I'm talking about everyone. There's just it's dripping with 90s. This, and it's extraordinary how like you can pinpoint it almost to the year like when this is.
But I was going to say what's interesting, Sam, and not necessarily like the cast or anything, but I tried to find some of the footage from the unaired pilots. So they made, I think, 2 pilots before this that were basically the same. I think the plot was essentially the same. Like a couple of scenes were different. We talked a lot about like unaired pilots. So the first one was very, very, very cheap, and I think quite short, 4 or 5 minutes long. And that was basically like the network. That was what they shopped around. And I think Saban shopped around for quite a long time and didn't really get anywhere. The second one, a bit higher production values. It was a full 20 minutes. And the big difference between that and the one we saw is that the actress for the Yellow Ranger is different. So they recast somebody. The plot, I think, is mostly the same. I watched some of it, and it looks like it was made in the 80s. All the characters are dressed like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Like, it looks very like 1989, as opposed to this episode, which I agree looks really like rooted in the early 90s. So I just thought I'd point that out, that like this so easily could have been like a real late 80s show, but just late enough.
Pushed it.
We should explain who Saban is. So Saban is Haim Saban. He is the man who purchased the rights to show Sentai outside of Asia, basically. So he's the reason it came over to him. I mean, he spent 8 years after getting the rights.
This guy's a genius, Joe, because he got the rights. He outsourced making the toys. He outsourced making the TV show. Like he essentially bought the rights and then
It took
talked
him.
to people, had it
Yeah.
made, and has made billions of dollars.
Well, no, let's.
Middle.
But actually, it took him 8 years to find somebody who wanted it. So the executive that was responsible, that Stan Lee went to at Marvel when he found this, funnily enough, was actually at Fox Family by the time Haim Saban got
Is this
it.
Margaret
So
Loesch?
Margaret
Yes.
Loesch, who we've talked about before on our
Spider-Man. She's the one
episode.
who took down Avi Arad with the Spider-Man
So
one, yeah.
she loved it when Stan Lee had it, so she took it to Fox and agreed to purchase the rights to it. Fox came back to her and went, "You are fucking mental. What are you doing? This is terrible." But they agreed to give her like a budget for a 20-minute show, but then nobody would actually play it. So what they actually had to do was have like a test, effectively, and they got a group of kids, sat them in a theatre with like a thing they could turn to say right if you like it, left if you don't. Played the episode, and everybody put it to the right. Every single kid absolutely loved it. So then they decided to run with it. But
Please do
You're
not take
touching on
the
an
knobs.
interesting point there, Joe, in terms of like the really weird, like singular, and we talked about singular production of this TV show. So Fox, like I think this show predates Fox Kids, like the cable channel.
it does, yeah. So it was
so at the time, basically Fox would buy like slots from like local networks in America, and then they would use they would buy 2 hours in the evening or 2 hours in the morning from Wisconsin network TV, and that would then be the Fox Kids hour or whatever. And they did later on get their own cable channel, but initially, basically, all of these local stations were like, "No, we're not showing this like weird, violent, silly, like Japanese inspired TV show on our channels."
who can blame
them? So for the first time, seemingly ever, like Loesch and Fox Kids like had to cut the affiliates in on the merchandising profits.
Wow.
So like she basically had to say, "Listen, this TV show is about selling toys. It's going to sell all the fucking toys. This is what Bandai have done in Japan. Trust me, it's going to be huge. Like you can have a percentage of the merchandising, but please show it." Because obviously the local affiliates, they would sell the space to Fox, but then they would be like, "We're not showing this. Like we don't want to show this to our audiences.
This is trash.
Which
this
I find
trash. Oh,
like the economics of television have changed so much that like that is just quite insane.
yeah. Yeah, and I think it shows the kind of nascent period as well in the 90s. When Fox was just starting out, there was lots of different kind of new opportunities and like paving the way, that 90s TV.
Other interesting thing with Bandai America as well, actually, who making the toys prior to this, they were like quite minor player. You have Hasbro and things like that, who were the big players. They had things like they had all the main kind of He-Man and stuff like that. Transformers, which is kind of the other big competitor for this. The biggest seller for Bandai America prior to this was sidewalk chalk, literally chalk for like colouring on sidewalk.
Chalk, yeah.
And then they got hold of it.
You kind of buried the lead there, Joe, by saying that was interesting.
It was interesting. No, but it's interesting to know that
That's interesting.
Yeah, and then within a year of this show airing, the Power Rangers were the best-selling toy, and it was over $1 billion in the first year alone. So they outsold Transformers, He-Man, everything.
Fuck you! They'll buy it, and they did.
Again, about the production of this, so Super Sentai, the way they made the TV show was they sat down with Bandai, and they designed the toys, and then they figured out how to put those toys in the TV program, rather than like Transformers or whoever. Transformers may be a bad example. Rather than almost anyone else who would like have a thing and then they would make a toy from that. It's kind of opposite. It's inverse from Super Sentai, where like Bandai controlled everything. They said, right, these are the robots that you're going to have in the upcoming season. This is what the characters are going to look like, and they would go, great, wonderful, we'll use that.
The molds were all from the Japanese factories. The writing on the back of the toys was Japanese, so everything was there.
We can't stress enough how much, like, how little work the American arm of this production did.
And that's why the names are so bad, because they got given these toys and they're like, well, we can't call them what the Japanese version is, so we have to give them up with a name. So they're like, shit, we're not very good with naming things. Quickly, come up with something. And it's how they ended up with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and
Zords.
The Zords, because it sounds like sword and dinosaur, basically.
Let's get into this episode a bit. And talk about Like, I think we can talk about how they represent these toys, especially later on when we get the transformation. We can talk about some of the toys that maybe we had, because I think this is, like I remember having these. The flip head one was great.
I wanted the flip head one, didn't get it.
Oh, fuck you, Joe. That's why.
Can I just say though, we're all too poor to have ever had a Zord, though, right?
No, I never had a Zord.
No,
Mitch had one of the flip head toys, and I broke it. So that's my claim to fame on those.
Let's get into these fresh-faced kids, though. Let's get into these fresh-faced kids, because this is where, like, this is your audience analog. Kids TV loves an audience analog. We want someone we can go, I'm just like the Yellow Ranger. Like, that's
Super Zord Ranger powered dude.
As usual, step one is hire a bunch of 25-year-olds.
You know who looks so old? Billy, the Blue Ranger, looks so old.
The one with the glasses.
And
he looks 45 years old.
He's like at least 5 or 10 years older than the rest of them, because he's just like, my God. He was born in the 70s, and
most of them were
69, I think.
Yeah,
it's just crazy.
So we meet our main cast, and we're kind of like introduced to. I don't even know if they give us a city name or whatever, but like
Angel City,
as usual.
Angle City, Angle.
Whatever. I've heard it both ways. So we're introduced to these teenagers, and the hangout, which is like every teen show, has like a hangout, and they go and it's a gym, and they're doing karate lessons.
Milkshakes.
Dancing on beams, and
we're gonna use colours here. We meet the Red Ranger, who's like the leader. He's like he's the biggest Power Ranger. He is the largest. Why does he not simply eat the smaller Power Rangers? So we've got the Red Power Ranger. He's teaching this karate lesson. We've got the Black Ranger, who, funnily enough, is a black guy. Well done, 1993 America.
It gets
I'm
worse.
not fucking done yet.
It gets worse.
We've got the Blue Ranger, who we talked about, is Billy. He's got the glasses.
Who's played by a Smurf. How racist can you get?
I always liked Billy the best because he had these really nerdy glasses, and I think he's left-handed as well. So when I was a kid, I really liked Blue Ranger.
God, the left-handed are so oppressed. They see someone on television, they're like, I relate to him. He's one of us.
The barest thing. And like,
your terrible
he's a bit
handwriting.
dopey, and he's not very like
he's
physical.
not like the rest. He's not like the rest, is he? He's just
he's
learning
a nerd.
karate.
He's the nerd.
Well, we see him struggling with the karate. The Red Ranger's looking really cool. All of these actors are like, I think, come from either dance or martial arts or kind of physical acting, and you can tell like the Red Ranger is fucking good at this. He can do spin kicks. He can do
the Black Ranger actually owns 3 karate schools now, so he teaches karate.
He's great. Like they and he can dance. By the way, my God, he can dance. They're
he
all
can dance if he wants to.
Dead. Jesus, Joe. They're all dead physical. The Pink Ranger, again, she's like she's got kind of she on the bar. What's the?
It's like really good balance.
Yeah, she's really good at gymnastics. She's also, by the way, like the most bland, stereotypical like visualization of a valley girl in the 90s. Like she's just. And she talks about like she talks about the Power Ranger helmet like messing up her hair and stuff like that. Do you want to hear some fun trivia, by the way? Is that just before we get on to the rest? So her character, I was reading about this. I spent all day just reading about the Power Rangers. Later on in the series, there's a body swap episode where she swaps bodies with Billy, and when they return to their own bodies, she's cleverer, so she gets to be a bit of a nerd later on, because she swapped bodies with Billy and like become a nerd from that. And there's something else where she like learns to be some other facet, but again, it's through some like alien magic, not through any fault of her own.
A woman could never learn things without alien intervention. Surely that's what the 90s is telling us.
Exactly. So rounding out the cast, we have the Yellow Ranger, who again, stereotypically, like, is played by an Asian woman. So
when you saying it took them until, when was it, 2010 or something, to realise that this was an issue?
No, something like they made 10 episodes of it, and then somebody on the production was like, "Hey, why's the black guy the Black Ranger and the Asian girls the Yellow Ranger?" And they were like, "It's 1993 and racism is endemic."
She was born in then South Vietnam, and.
This actor was Thoy Trang, by the way.
Yeah. Who sadly, I think she died, didn't she?
She
Like,
passed
Died in
away,
2001 in a car crash.
Car crash.
Pretty unfortunate.
It's
Yeah.
very sad. But yeah, like I never noticed this as a kid, obviously, because
I noticed it within 30 seconds. So I watched the Toys That Made Us episode before I watched
as
the
a
episode of
child,
Power Rangers.
as a child,
I didn't. But when I watched it back, within 30 seconds of Toys That Made Us playing, and they showed clips of the show, I was like,
But
that's
that
an
is one
issue.
thing we should say. Like, yes, it's important to mention it, but I don't think that necessarily comes from any like, what's the word? I don't think that the Asian character is the Yellow Ranger because of racism. I think it's just
I don't
like
know.
in the super. Hear me out here, Sam. I'm going somewhere. Because in the Super Sentai, there's a Yellow Ranger, and like in the initial unaired pilot of this, it's a white girl playing this character, and they basically decided that the Yellow Ranger and the Pink Ranger were going to be the women characters, despite the fact, we should add, by the way, that there's only one female character in Super Sentai, so all the fight footage, the Yellow Ranger turns into a man for all the fight scenes.
But can I just point out
superpower.
that like how difficult would it be for them to go? That's a bit of an issue. Why don't we make the Asian woman the Pink Ranger?
Right. So what you're saying is, number one, it's actually sexism is the thing because yellow and pink are girly colours, and number two, I think it is like
I think it is. Yeah.
brain dead. Maybe nobody thought about it.
Yeah,
They
not
definitely
intentional.
Hold on, they
Yeah.
definitely thought about it with the Black Ranger. They definitely thought about it. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with like, that maybe there's like an identity thing, but I'm sure there were no decision makers involved in this who were thinking about it in that sense. So I just think it's just 90s stupidity and actually I bet you it had quite a detrimental impact on like black kids growing up who wanted to be the Red Ranger because he's the leader and he's the coolest one, and in their group or when they were buying toys, they weren't allowed to be because they had to be the Black Ranger or whatever else. Like, I'm sure that happened. So, you know what? Fuck you, fucking Power Rangers, perpetuating more of this shit. But there we go. It's the 90s, so
it's rife with problems.
And none of us obviously noticed as white kids.
No,
so
kids
of course,
Right.
because like we all grew up in like we should say incredibly white areas of an incredibly white country.
yeah.
So we talked about the Power Rangers.
Privilege.
So the Pink Ranger is the only like female Power Ranger when they're like suited up, wearing a skirt, which is odd and like again like serves to make it like so she's just like the
noticed
token
that.
girl.
She's got a skirt on for fighting.
She's got a skirt do her outfit. Like I think they changed that later on.
In
But,
the
that's from the Super Sentai footage, by the way.
Yeah,
like
from
her Power Ranger
Rangers.
outfit has a skirt on it.
Yeah, the G Ranger footage, they have like capes on. All of them have like a little cape of some sort on them.
She has a cape for her waist. That's what I'm talking
In Power Rangers, she's the only one that has a cape.
about.
Of a skirt.
she's-
For a waist.
She's a skirt. She's got a skirt, yeah. But it is just what it is. So
Entirely
those are
pointless. Entirely pointless skirt. as
And
well.
also tactically, like you could grab that really easily, and then you've got, you like the whole go with your super tight suits like everyone else has. I want to see them all being able to fight
Sam,
equally.
though, it's difficult to assess like because obviously there was no production decision that said right the Pink Ranger she's going to have a skirt on because they just took this. Like you said, Joe, it was inspired by that other show, but Super Sentai, the series, is what this footage is that they're using, which was like had aired in Japan a couple of years previously. So it's not the original stuff that Saban watched and got the rights for. Retroactively, he had the rights because he'd gotten the rights, but this is later stuff. So she has a skirt in that, so therefore she has to have a skirt in the Western footage, or it doesn't make any sense. Not that any of it makes any sense.
Let's talk about Rita because I think this is where everything just gets scarily close to falling apart. She's in the moon and she never really leaves the moon until I think later on in the series when she does with footage that they actually shot especially for this, which is imagine that. Imagine how much money it must have been making to get that costume out of
$4.50.
Yeah.
Well, like we said, Sam, they couldn't have them in the same place because they were using archive footage, basically.
Yeah,
so they couldn't have the baddies interact with our actors
Put her on
because
the moon.
we've
Put her
already
on the
fucking
moon.
got the footage of her.
and then you only show shots of her speaking from behind, and then you have maybe 3 seconds where she can actually see her face, her lips moving, which it's completely incomprehensible, and it's just her going.
This voiceover is bad. The voice work for a lot of the baddies is.
I think
obviously
the term is
they have to dub
broad.
it.
I think it's a broad. It's a broad performance.
But it's like you said, Sam. With the latest series, they did have. There was communication, obviously, between Super Sentai and this, and like they would have the baddies. They would say the English lines phonetically, and then it makes it easier for them to dub it in because the mouth movements are right. Whereas obviously in this episode,
they'd be closer.
Do you know what I mean? Like in this episode, these are Japanese actors speaking Japanese to one another, and they're just dubbing English over it. It's like that tropey sort of like 60s like a karate movie where I will defeat you. I have the power.
Yeah, just
and there's like 10 minutes
going.
of just mouth.
What it actually became was
finished.
those like really cheap adverts where they do voiceovers and you have the actor like saying the lines, but then they dub over it. That's what it becomes.
You've got
afterwards.
the German version of whatever bleach they're trying to sell at you. Yeah.
But the voice work for Rita isn't even good. Like
no, it's not.
Even if you close your eyes, it still sounds bad.
I get a real Masters of the Universe feel from all of her like hench gargoyles or whatever they are. Like all of that thing. It's just the costume design.
Putty patrollers, Sam. Don't forget the putty patrollers.
Sorry. All of that is just that real like. It's very stylized, it's very cheap and nasty, but at the same time, very intricate as well. Like, there's obviously a lot of work to get some of these costumes going, but you can almost see all of the lines there. You can see it's a person in a suit, with it just looks extremely naff. It goes to the low budget stuff, which comes from Japan, but also, they didn't pump any more money into this, which is especially kind of shown with the pittance that they paid the American actors. I saw a figure of like $600 a week in LA in the 90s is a figure that I saw. It was non-union, which means that they couldn't, they weren't going to get the rates. The non-union space Power Rangers equivalent. They had there was lots of stuff about safety as well. Later on, there were people like set on fire and stuff. The whole thing was a total exploitation of these teenagers who, by the way, set up this billion-dollar business, had toys of their likeness sold everywhere. These kids and these remaining adults, zero royalties, nothing, absolutely nothing. Which we talked about the genius of Saban. But fuck you, capitalist pig. Like, pay your workers, pay these actors who were going out there. You would think as well,
like, it would have helped keep these guys around because I think most of the cast stayed around for 3 seasons-ish. Or 2 or 3 seasons.
2 seasons, yeah.
And 3 of them stayed for a third.
3 of them left, I think.
Some of them stayed, but like, and then basically we are in like, we copy the Japanese formula where they cycle the cast every year and they change. You know what I mean? And
they introduce a couple of more Rangers as well. So you get a Green Ranger who then turns.
Oh, the
evil.
Green Ranger was so mysterious and cool.
And then he turns evil as well.
And then he changes into the White Ranger. Mm-hmm. He starts off evil, Joe. He starts off evil. When he comes in, he's the Green Ranger and he's evil. And we fight the Green Ranger. And like, we don't know what's going on. Then when he's introduced to us as Tommy, just another white guy, obviously. And he kind of becomes the leader. And then for unknown reasons, due to the fact that it's a storyline in the Japanese version, but not in the American version, he just becomes the White Ranger. Because essentially in the Japanese version, there's a storyline where for some reason he changes colors. But like they hadn't set that up in the US version. So he just changes color one day and he's now the White Ranger. And like, okay.
Don't question it. I mean, we're not going to stick on the plot too much here, but the one bit I do want to talk about is how you've got Rita on the moon who decides that her thing is to destroy the nearest planet. Apparently, that's her thing. It's just what she does. So this
very clear about it, Joe. When she emerges from her dumpster, she's like, "Oh, I'm going to destroy the nearest planet because that's my thing when I escape from prison."
Yeah. This floating head guy and a robot. Yeah, and this robot decide that they need to do something about it, and that's where my quote comes in. He literally says to her, "To transport to us 5 overbearing and over-emotional humans," and the robot goes, "Oh no, not teenagers," and then
This is like,
randomly picks 5 teenagers. It just happens to
God.
be these 5 teenagers from nowhere.
This is the basis of a TV show. Like, this is everything comes down to this moment, and because it's kids' TV, it doesn't really matter. Like, just get to the money, get us to the Power
And
Rangers.
it does. From this point, it goes at like 1,000 miles an hour when you're there. All of a sudden, they're in the Zord and Megazord, Dinozord.
Yeah, I know. This is amazing. The bit where they all travel, you can see these blurs flying through the air. Like, that scene throughout, because we've watched about 6, 7 of these episodes by now. That little scene, which is used 2 or 3 times an episode, does the most enormous amount of heavy lifting.
Can I just say, when you're saying we,
Like,
he's talking about him and his son, not me, Dave, and Sam. I've watched
Yeah, I was
one
gonna say,
episode.
we haven't sat
You'll
down
watch
and
more.
watched 6 episodes of this.
God, you guys have the lowest standards of television of anyone I've ever met, so you'll be there, I guarantee.
What season of Suits is your wife on?
It doesn't count anywhere near to all the fucking X-Files you guys watch. My God. But anyway,
X-Files is good TV, just not
Sure.
the episodes with aliens.
so but this bit where they're flying through the air, it just everything pins on that moment, because how do we get them to the next fight scene? Whoop, there we go, no problem. How do we get them back? Whoop. There's one bit I think in the 3rd episode where they're in the middle of a fight, and the Zordon says, "Get them back," and right, whoop, and they've got their suits on. Like, what is it? I just want to give you these new weapons, and there we go. New
But that's
weapons,
the thing, like in the
and
first,
then just sends
You
them
know
back in.
Do you know
Yeah.
what that is, Sam? Do you know what that is? Is they only had so much footage of them fighting, and then they had new weapons. It's like, right, we need a scene where they've got
Exactly.
these new weapons.
Exactly.
But the
And
thing
and
is,
there
in the
was no
first
cheaper
fight,
way
though,
of doing it. There was
in the
no,
first fight, they just know about these weapons. Like, there's nothing. So to begin with, they're like, "Oh yeah, we're not having this." They walk off. They get attacked by some putty patrollers. So they start fighting them. Realize that they need to actually be Power Rangers. So they power up, and then within 20 seconds of powering up, they realize they're not powerful enough because Rita from the moon fires her magic wand and makes one of her ugly guys massive.
big inhale.
So they realize
stuff.
they need the Megazord, so they become a Megazord. That's not enough. So they then go super duper Megazordy Zord, and then that's not enough. So not only do they then, because he has a sword, so they have to go and get a sword. So they know to like grab a power sword, and all of the time they know how to do these things without being told. And they're like, "Oh, this is so natural to me now. It's like breathing."
It's amazing. You know what I always wondered as a kid? How are they
insane.
controlling the Megazord thing? Because all you see them doing is hold.
Don't question it.
The Red Ranger's got one joystick, and he's sitting there holding this joystick, just moving it around. Like, I always wondered how are they like moving so fluidly, and how does
What are
the
the other
robot
guys
work?
doing? What are the other guys actually doing? If he's got the joystick, what are they there for?
It
is
reminds.
a question,
Hold on. It reminds me of the bridge on Star Trek. Like, basically, there's an Uhura at the back who's just sitting there telling them what the computer's saying. There's Chekhov. I mean, what the fuck is Chekhov doing? Like, no one knows. And this just makes no sense. It makes no sense. God damn, this TV show's rolling me up.
And that's pretty much the end of the episode, isn't it? That's pretty much like the end of it.
Pretty much. We did get like we talked about the Zords. Now we never really get like we've got the Sabertooth Zord and the Tyrannosaurus Zord. Tyrannosaur?
Stegosaurus.
There's like a mammothy one.
Stegosaurus Zord.
Isn't there a mammothy?
The pterodactyl Zord. We've got all these dinosaurs.
Pterodactyl.
Dinosaurs are cool, by the way. We've got all these Zords, but all we get is the same stock footage of these Zords like racing through deserts every time. The same stock footage, and then
I have to say,
and then they form together into the Megazord. We never get like individual Zords.
it looks awesome. It looks
It
awesome when especially the saber-toothed tiger one is like bounding along, and there's like some miniature, and they're blowing a little bit of dust up there. It looks amazing.
Those toys, by the way, those robot toys that you could like transform and things.
Because you could build one, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
Did you have to buy them all? I can't remember.
Yeah, because what they actually then did is, like, at the end when they had new seasons, effectively the old Megazord could then fasten onto the new Zord from the new season. So you'd have like Zord within a Zord within a Zord. So it was like Zordception.
Wow. So
I never had any of these toys because they were too expensive.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah,
and they'd have been
I didn't even have
broken
the flip
immediately.
doll. Yeah.
Before we get on to the toys we had, Sam, because I know that's what you were going to say, I just want to mention about, like, just in case we haven't underlined exactly how cheap this episode of television was, they even reused footage that they shot for a different episode in this first episode. So if your eagle-eyed viewers will be able to tell that in the scene with the karate, and we haven't mentioned Bulk and Skull, the two comic relief characters, who, by the way, I think they're in all 7 seasons of the original, like, Power Rangers. I think they are the only characters that are in all of it, like, regardless. And they're kind of just like the local idiots who are, and we get some lovely, like, vaudevillian sound effects as they fall over and, like, do pratfalls and stuff. Anyway, in this scene, which is like before they've been teleported by Zordon. They have Power Ranger communicators on. All 5 of them have got Power Ranger communicators on in that scene because it's footage that they shot, and we don't even get the Power Ranger communicators in this episode. It's episode 2 or 3. They shot this for a different episode, and basically the censors said whatever they had shot was too violent, and, like, you can't use it. So they were like, right, well, we'll just use that footage we've shot for something else, and we'll figure that out later. So they even reuse their own footage to not have to shoot new footage. It's quite mad.
Amazing. One more thing, and I think we also should maybe talk about the cultural impact of this as well. But we mentioned the staff, the cast leaving. In terms of reusing footage, there's an episode. I think it's in the end of episode 2. It's a 2-parter, and I think the staff left. The 3 of them left in the middle of this 2-part episode. So there's, I think, I'm just looking now. So basically, They left the show over contract disputes, and to disguise it, they used a combination of body doubles, voice doubles, stock footage, and previous footage of the Power Rangers TV show they'd already shot. So you think about the Inception levels of, like, reuse of footage here. You know, we just layer upon layer upon layer. In the middle of a 2-part episode where they had to just, like, go back to, you know, one of the Yellow Ranger nodding when, and, you know, even there's a clock behind her that keeps changing, like in The Simpsons. Like, just to the extent to which they were willing to make this as cheap as possible, despite any sense.
There's a rich tradition of that, Sam. In Doctor Who, the original Doctor Who in the 60s and the 70s, they did a similar thing where, over a contract dispute, the current Doctor quit, wouldn't film the last episode. So what they did was they got the new guy and they put him in a blonde wig, and they just shot it with that.
Well, there's a big element of it's SDTV. There's no, like, VHS is still quite.
A couple of other interesting things with this, actually. So we talked about how Fox wasn't set up when this was released. The reason for them setting up Fox Family Network initially was almost specifically because of this show, because they wanted more time for it. So it was set up, and Saban and Murdoch were 50-50 owners. Of the show. They eventually sold it to Disney in the early 2000s, who managed to make a massive cock up of it, and it basically went massively downhill. Nobody was interested. They tried to sell it again in 2010. Nobody was interested apart from Haim Saban, who had regretted selling it back in the early 2000s. He thought he wished that they'd held on to the rights to Power Rangers, so he bought it back at, like, a fraction of the cost he'd sold it for.
It doesn't seem like a thing Disney would be into. You know, like, there's no way they're going to be touching this.
Do you know what Disney's into though, Sam? Money. Disney's into
marketing, toys. Talk about the toys. So the toys I had the flip head toy, which we didn't have lots of them. We only had maybe 1 or 2, where you could inside his, like, along his shoulders was like a little flippy thing, and you could change him from the
human head to the Power Ranger head, wasn't it?
Power Ranger head. Like, that was.
There was a button on the front, wasn't there? You just pressed the chest effectively, and it just went.
Yes.
Helmet optional.
So cool.
I wanted one so badly. My cousin had one, and that's the one I broke.
We had 2, I think. We had a Green Ranger one and a Black Ranger one, I think. And I think one of them was so old and worn that you couldn't really see anything on it. It was like basically a piece of blank plastic.
Yeah.
But I remember really wanting the Megazords. I wanted one of the robots. But obviously, I didn't have money at that point.
I don't know if we ever had them. I'm not sure. I can't really remember. I remember maybe the chess piece.
If your dad's watching, maybe he can fill us in with that piece of information.
I think actually, yeah, he's probably still, genuinely, without exaggeration, he's probably still got some of these.
Your dad is going to lose points if he didn't buy you a Zord. In my mind,
failure as a father.
If you're there, we expect you to tell us. If not, where the hell are you?
Yeah. He'll be in touch. I'll ask him about this. But the toy mania of this was just crazy, wasn't it? And I think it really goes to the kind of backlash probably from parents as well, because number one, the toys, mummy, buy me the Bone Storm. Number two, the violence in this as well, which was kind of like there was quite a big reaction against this because it is
pretty violent.
It's pretty violent. It's pretty violent, and for the 90s, it's quite seriously. I think there were it was pulled off some channels in New Zealand and I think Canada as well. And this is before it really gets. I think maybe the next one along was where they went even crazier, even more.
It's all the fighting scenes, and I can understand it because me and my brothers and sisters were constantly kicking each other and punching each other, and we're playing Power Rangers. Oh, Tim's bleeding from the face. Can you not do that? I also spoke to my mum about this. I asked her, and she said the same thing. She said she learned by the time we were like 5 or 6 years old to just not watch the TV if there was a kids program on, because it was just like, God, why is this?
Yeah,
I think Pokemon's the one that did that, to be fair, but we certainly watched a lot of this as well.
Got to catch them all.
Got to buy them all. That's what we got to do, just like these Power Rangers.
Well, even just the Power Rangers, it was the enemies as well. You had to buy you had to buy Rita and her crew of motley enemies.
I don't know. I mean, my son has ungodly amounts of toys, and I don't know if the clamour. I don't know if it's because maybe there isn't as kind of the monoculture of kids TV is not quite as strong now, but it doesn't feel as intense, and. I don't know if maybe.
I think it's gone away from toys more to digital as well as part of it as well.
That's true.
There's the move away from physical actual toys.
And I also think kind of the internet has taken the steam out of that a lot, where you can buy, if you want an Iron Man toy, you don't have to go and buy the Disney Marvel produced, very well made, official toy from Toys R Us. You don't have to queue on a fucking week before Christmas to buy it for your kid. You can go on the internet and get a cheap Taiwanese knockoff that will cost you a fraction of the price and be delivered to your door. And I think that's changed it more than anything else, is that there's a lot less money in licensing big expensive toys because it's so difficult to police counterfeits and it's so easy to get hold of them, we should say.
I still think it's there, but I think you're right. There's certainly it feels maybe because of the spread of media as well that we're not quite. I mean, Paw Patrol is one example that we've just got rid of loads of Paw Patrol stuff because he's not really playing with it anymore. And you are like, good Lord, the amount of plastic, and we've sent it off to other people to enjoy, rather than. But there we go. That's the circle.
I really like all my Paw Patrol toys. They're really fun to play with.
Good. The Paw Patroller. It's an amazing toy. Huge thing. I can see it right down there. I'm in my son's toy room right now, full of all this plastic crap.
Great insulative properties, though. That's why it sounds so good.
Yes, good. It's nice deep vocals from the Dora the Explorer stuff over there. So Power Rangers,
pretty much done.
Yeah. I feel like it's quite an intense 49 minutes of broadcasting because of just, I feel like,
very intense.
The Power Rangers.
We have mentioned really, we often don't. I think if you're listening to the podcast feed of this, you'll have heard the music, the intro theme as we came in, and I'm hoping Sam will maybe pepper some of the sound effects throughout, especially the Hulk and Skull boing.
What about the Putty Patrollers as well? Their noise they make like a
the sounds for this are insane. Obviously, like the opening theme for one was like, "Wow, I'm having flashbacks." Being a child.
The bit when it's oh my god, when it's transforming into the Mega One, you know, like the guitar is going fucking mad, and the whole thing is like dripping with acid. You know, it's just the hardest. And you think about it from a boomer parent who's sat down with a physical newspaper, you know, in the morning, and there's like this this aggressive kids are having seizures on the floor from all the flashing like that. It's really quite it's hardcore
Singular.
show, isn't it? It's
Just something else interesting on the toys, actually. So we said that they used Bandai toys. Something that they had to do was like change some of them, because with the dagger, for example, the safety rules in America are so much more stringent, or were so much more stringent than they were in Japan. So the weapon in Japan wouldn't have passed the American safety controls because it was too sharp. So they actually had to like change the cast for it so that it was like blunter.
Made of rubber, basically,
safer.
wasn't it?
Yeah. Whereas the Japanese version was actually quite sharp, because they didn't have the same rules. So,
damn Japan, you're going for it.
Yeah,
going for it.
Yeah. But we've gone long on this, so let's get the fudge out of here. And as usual, we are Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Oh, well done.